back with another post-game analysis. Colorado wins in Tucson 24-13. Brian, you avoided the CU police escort to get some in and out after the game. Let's start there. How was your double-double?
It was good. I'm not a big in and out guy, but when you're one in Rome, right? And it's really the only fast food place I saw between the stadium and the hotel, so figured I'd go there. But yes, I did have to stop at a light and saw the police escort for the Buffs going to the airport. So I know they at least left the stadium safely.
Well, a little bit of a different game for the Buffs. They find themselves down 13-0 early on. The biggest deficit CU had faced prior to that was 3-0 early against Stanford. So we saw a little bit of a different side of this team having to come back. And the comeback was kind of throwback Big 8 CU football, a strong, really strong ground game and good defense. The Wildcats did not score again. Buffs improved to 4-0. What were your overall takeaways from tonight's game?
Well, I think the Buffs found a way to win a game where they didn't play very well, at least early on, and they found a way to win when their quarterback didn't play very well. You mentioned throwback to Big 8. I thought it was a throwback to 2016 in some ways, where there were several games in the middle of that season that the Buffs won relying on that defense, and we've now seen it 2 games in a row where, 4 years ago, you think about that Stanford game and that UCLA game, ones where the offense didn't do a whole lot, and Cephalufat didn't do a whole lot, but they relied on that ground game and that defense. That's what they've done the last 2 weeks, and it feels like we're bringing up comparisons to 2016 a lot, but I think there's a lot of similarities, and I think this team was able to do that tonight and really overcome a bad start and not a very good performance by Sam Neuer.
We're obviously going to get to Jarek Broussard's great night on the ground, but I want to start on defense, Brian. Nate Landman was credited with 16 tackles tonight. He had his 10th career sack. And there was a shot of Nate Landman on the sideline in the game where his helmet was off and there was blood on his forehead, and he had a big smile on his face. I'm not wishing blood on anybody's forehead, but I don't know if there's been a better way to capture Nate Landman than that picture of him on the sideline.
I'm not sure we've seen a happier warrior since like William Wallace and Braveheart, right? I don't want to maybe throw that in there, but Nate Landman's awesome. I mean, he's so fun to watch. I actually had a chance after the game where I leave the stadium. I have to walk by, where the buses are for CU, and because I left early enough after the game, they were still there. I had a chance to chat briefly with Brian Cabral, who made the trip, and he was talking about Nate Landman, and he just said, "I love watching this kid play," and talk about how special he is, and told me he's up there. He's one of the greats that he's ever been around, and there's all the diehard Buff fans that have been around for a long time remember some of those great linebackers like Chad Brown and Matt Russell and guys like that, and Nate's right up there. I mean, he's so fun to watch, and I gotta say, I don't know what you guys could see on the broadcast, but like there was that drive that ended with Nigel Bethel's interception, where Nate Landman was not in that drive most of the way, and he was in the medical tent, and we saw Quinn Perry and Jonathan Van Diest playing linebacker, and it's nothing against them. I just think there's something different about Nate being in there. And Arizona drove down the field, and they get down about the 5-yard line, and all of a sudden I see Nate sprinting out of the medical tent, and there's a timeout, and he runs all the way down the other end of the field, and goes into the game. In the first play, he makes the tackle. 2 plays later, Nigel gets the interception, and they get the stop. So he's such a difference maker, and you can tell when he's on the field and when he's not.
I'd be lying if I told you I knew what every other linebacker in the country is doing. I think the only thing that's going to keep potentially Nate Landman from winning the Butkus Award, though, Brian, is the fact that they're just not going to play as many games as some other teams. But he's definitely playing like you would imagine. Again, I'm not watching every team. I can't imagine there's a linebacker in the country playing better than him right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And not only not enough games, but I think that, Colorado's recent history could work against him as well. I think a lot of times those awards go to, guys that play for Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama, guys like that. And if you're not on one of those teams or already on that All-American radar going into the season, you don't get it. I think that could work against him, but I agree with you. I haven't watched everybody, but when I've watched games, I mean, there's there's not a linebacker I've seen that's better than Nate Landman, and I can't imagine there's many in the Pac-12 that are playing better than Nate and Carson as far as a duo right now, because those two guys have been absolute animals.
We probably should have talked about in and out before we talked about Jarek Broussard's night. 301 rushing yards on 25 carries, a 12-yard average. Obviously, some big chunk runs in there that really helped that average. But the best starts through 4 games for a CU back in program history. He tops Rashawn Salam's 727 rushing yards through 4 games at CU in 1994. And kind of appropriate, it's the 4-year anniversary of Rashawn's death. And, obviously, especially in 2020, you'd always want to bring awareness to mental health awareness. But shifting over to Jarek, I mean, he definitely is the reason this team is 4-0 right now. I have to wonder where they are without him.
Yeah, no question. And I mean, the offense looked terrible up until that 75-yard run that he had that got them going, and they were doing nothing. And all of a sudden, he breaks off that run and puts them right there at the 20. And then Shad Clayton comes in and finishes off that drive. It's unfortunate that all of those long runs that Jarek had, somebody else finished off with a touchdown, but he put them in position. He didn't get any of the touchdowns, but he put them in position every single time. And, he was that spark. Sam Neuer threw for less than 100 yards tonight, and Jarek Broussard rushes for 300. Broussard rushed for 300 because they weren't doing anything in the passing game. And, it was frustrating to watch. I mean, it was the quarterbacking was frustrating to watch tonight, but every time they needed something, Jarek would bail them out and have a big run. And it was fun to see, even fun to watch all year. And he just continues to surprise us because nobody saw this coming. At least nobody that wasn't in practice, apparently.
Yeah, right. Ashad Clayton, he scores his first 2 career touchdowns. Jaron Mangum gets in there, 5 carries for 12 yards. Joe Davis, 4 carries for 6 yards. So they got those other backs in there. And I know it's tougher for some of those other backs, and Clayton scored, so he had a good night. But it's going to be hard for those guys without, a lot of carries to get in a rhythm. But, I mean, again, it's clear that you need to ride Broussard as much as you can and take him out only when he's tired.
Yeah, and just because we haven't seen a whole lot of those guys do much. And I thought Jaron Mangum ran better tonight than he has all season. Part of that was he got better blocking. You and I have talked about before that I think it was the UCLA game that every time that they gave Mangum the ball, it's like they didn't block for him because he was tackled 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But he had a better night than he's had. I thought he had some good runs. But, aside from Clayton getting a couple of short touchdowns, there hasn't been much from the backups. I thought Clayton looked good, actually. He also had that 17-yard run to get him, I think it was 17 yards to get him down near the goal line before his touchdown. But they haven't gotten a whole lot out of the backups. I would still like to see them get more out of that and keep Jarek more towards 20 carries. But hey, if you're going to run for 300 yards every night, then go for it.
407 rushing yards for the Buffs. That's the most for a CU team since 2002. You mentioned Sam Neuer not having a great night. He did have 67 yards on the ground. There was a back and forth he had with Carl Jarrell on the sideline after the second time he got picked off by Anthony Pandy, and he was, pretty fired up. Carl Jarrell was asked about that after the game, and he said nothing was personal. It was, I think, maybe a good sign. We know, Sam Neuer has a lot of moxie, a lot of fire. He talked about how he doesn't get down on those runs because he's got the adrenaline going. And Carl Jarrell has, I don't know if he's been criticized for this, but he's even keeled most of the time. But in that moment, he showed a lot of passion, which, again, I don't think is a bad thing. If had that kind of lingered on, maybe that's an issue. But I think, it just shows kind of the fire that both those guys have.
Yeah, and I will say I haven't seen it because obviously, being at the game, I didn't watch the broadcast, and where I sit in the Arizona press box, there was no TV around me. I haven't seen any of the broadcasts, so but I have heard about it, and but yeah, you're right. I mean, you like to see that, and it's not the first time that we've seen some. I've seen a little emotion out of Carl on the sidelines, but he's not as passive as fans might have thought or might think that he is. He's shown some of that, and like I said, I haven't seen that clip, but it's good to know that happens because Carl's a guy that I think can get on guys and can teach them And that's something I think Sam will learn from, because both those interceptions were his fault. They weren't good throws at all. They weren't good reads. And I'm not sure what he was looking at there, because both times it seemed like the Arizona defender was right there kind of waiting for the pass.
Kari Cush was out due to COVID-19 contract protocol. Josh Gines gets his first start in there, and then with the offensive line sticking there, Chance Lytle, of course, suffered what looked to be a pretty scary injury there, needed a cart to take him off the field. Definitely thoughts with him. What were just your overall thoughts on the rest of the offensive effort tonight for the Buffs?
Well, I thought, there were some receivers that made some good plays. I thought Dimitri Stanley, made a couple good plays. I still can't believe that they're not throwing him the ball that much. I mean, that's 2 games in a row. He had a couple catches tonight, but that's 2 games in a row that they haven't really looked his way much. I mean, he had since that big first half against Stanford a couple weeks ago, where he had, I think, 4 catches, almost 100 yards. He's only had, I think, 4 catches since then, or 5. So it's not much, and they haven't looked his way a whole lot. I just think they got to get him more involved. I think the offensive line played fairly well. It's too bad for Chance Lytle, because I think he's been playing really well. He finally gets his shot, and he was playing well. Looks like he's done for the year, though. But not a lot out of that passing game, and they got to get that going if they're going to beat some good teams here down the stretch. I mean, they got Utah this next week, and then we'll see that week after that. It could be a Pac-12 title game. It could be, who knows, but they're going to play better competition down the stretch.
Mustafa Johnson had a sack, and Carson Wells, another excellent effort. Career high 11 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss. He mentioned that he's roommates with Nate Landman in the post-game press conference. They don't need a security system at that apartment or house, whatever their living situation is. Those guys, Carson Wells is maybe overshadowed just because Nate Landman is having such a great season, but he's been pretty incredible in his own right.
Yeah, and Carl Duro was asked that this last week, and said, "Hey, Carson's playing as good as anybody on our defense," and he was tonight as well. As good as Nate Landman was, and how much he sticks out. Carson's right up there. If it wasn't for Nate Landman, Carson would be by far the best player on this defense. He's got 11 tackles for loss the last 3 games at him. There's some seasons we don't see anybody with that many tackles for loss. He's been awesome, and he's so much fun to watch. And there's plays that he was right there and maybe didn't get credit for a tackle for loss, but he helped force it. So he's been a lot of fun. And you're right. I wouldn't want to be a burglar or anything at the Landman/Wells apartment.
Akil Jones became a father this week. He was in New Jersey welcoming his son Adonis into the world. That gave John Van Diest and Quinn Perry a chance to see more time at inside linebacker. Generally, the defensive effort, I think I'm almost kind of blinded because early on in the game, they weren't very good, but you got to give them credit, for about 3 quarters there. Arizona really wasn't able to muster much. They were able still to break a few runs, but nothing too significant. Obviously, they didn't score any more points.
Yeah, and I'll say, I don't know if this should be off the record or not, but it's not going to be now. So the first time I've seen assistant coaches in person this year was in the bathroom at Arizona Stadium tonight. So it took that to actually see somebody in person. So I ran into a defensive coach in the bathroom at halftime, and I won't say who it is, but I was told that, hey, Arizona came out with some things that we didn't scout early in this game, and we adjusted to it, and it got much better late in the first half. So based off of what he was telling me, they just Arizona came out with a few things early in that game that they weren't ready for. And that's when they scored their first touchdown. And once they adjusted to it, they played really well. So, credit to the defensive staff and the players for making that in-game adjustment, because I think it was Arizona's first drive they scored the touchdown on, and after that they get 6 points, and that's it. And the Buffs were great after that.
Yeah, Colorado under 20 points allowed for the second straight week. Remember that long streak of allowing 30 or more that went on for. It seemed like a season and a half. So obviously, it's encouraging to see those adjustments that they made. Any other thoughts on the defensive effort tonight?
No, in the secondary, I thought there was some good play. I thought Mekhi Blackman again played pretty well tonight. They had a couple of unfortunate pass interference penalties late in the game, but I thought Christian Gonzalez made a couple of nice plays. I thought Isaiah Lewis once again was all over the place and made a few tackles. There were a couple times that He came out on blitzes and almost got to Will Plummer before the pass, but the pass got off and it ended up being incomplete. But I think a lot of it was because Isaiah Lewis was putting that pressure on. So I think those guys continue to play well in the back or get better in the back. I think right now this defense is playing really well, and they're kind of fun to watch.
Was venturing into criticizing Josh Watts because he hasn't been overly impressive as a punter, especially after Arizona had that long return early in the game. But it seemed like he settled down as the game went along, had 3 punts inside the 20. Evan Price made his only field goal, a 19-yarder, and Dimitri Stanley had a pretty nice punt return late as well.
Yeah, I think Josh Watts has just kind of gotten better each game. That first game, you kind of watch me like, ooh, boy, they're going to struggle at punter. But I think he's kind of gotten better as the season's gone along and as he's gotten used to being with this team and playing football. I thought tonight he was pretty good. Landed a couple of punts inside the 20, had a couple nice bounces on punts. So he did a great job there. Evan Price, you're right. I mean, not much to say about him. He basically hit some extra points. Maybe even the field goal was basically an extra point. But he went out there and got his job done. And Dimitri Stanley, was nice to see him finally break a punt return there. They didn't have anything on kick returns, I don't think. I mean, Arizona's kicker has put almost everyone in the end zone for a touchback this year, so that wasn't a surprise. But it was good to see Dimitri actually break one and get a nice return.
Carl Durrell is just one of 5 coaches in program history to start out 4-0. And he's the second in the last 115 years to accomplish that feat. So, yeah, we can nitpick a few things here and there, but I mean, if you told CU fans that this team would be 4-0 and, be one of the top 2-3 programs in the Pac-12, given what happened this past winter, it's bordering on a miracle, honestly.
It is. I mean, it's almost we started this thing by mentioning 2016. It's almost more impressive than 2016 because the 2016 season, as it went along, it sort of made sense, right? Because you had all those guys that have been together for a long time. Guys like Cheeto and Tedrick and all those guys on the defense that had played together that had showed some signs in 2015 of maybe turning the corner. So 2016 made some sense. This doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's you've got a quarterback that was a safety last year. You got a running back that nobody had seen before. You have this coach that nationally it was kind of the Buffs' choice was kind of laughed at in some regards. This team was not supposed to be any good at all. I think in a full 12-game schedule, people would have been surprised for them to win 4 games, and here they are sitting at 4-0 right now. So I think it's maybe even more miraculous or impressive than 2016.
Like you mentioned, Utah's up next this coming Friday. Mathematically, the Pac-12 South is going to come down to the Buffs or Trojans. USC is scheduled to play Washington State on Sunday, and then they've got UCLA in their finale. I think now we're kind of getting closer to where you can talk about some of these tiebreakers. You kind of broke it down on our preview, but if USC keeps winning, then CU is going to be put in a really frustrating spot.
Yeah, unless the conference does something unexpected and pivots and says, you know what, we're going to put CU versus USC, because right now that's what it should be. If both teams are undefeated, that's what it should be. Everybody in the North now, well, I guess Washington has 1 loss, but let's say Oregon beats Washington next week. Everybody in the North would have at least 2 losses, and then you would be sitting there with 2 teams in the South undefeated if that if everybody wins out. They should put them together. So we'll see if that actually happens, but I don't know if the Pac-12 will do that or not. If they don't, that'll be very frustrating for the Buffs, and there's not much you can do about it. It's not fair, but there's a whole lot of stuff in 2020 that's not fair, and there's a lot worse things than your Buffs being 6-0 and not being able to play in a Pac-12 title game. Take it for what it is, be frustrated, but there's still a lot of football to be played. We're not there yet. I think USC's got a couple of big hurdles in front of them. CU's got a massive hurdle in front of them next Friday. All
right, Brian. Well, are you going to get some more in and out before heading back to Colorado so you don't have to wait in that long line down there in Aurora?
I'm not, and I'm fine not going to the long line in Aurora because I'm from Colorado, and good times is better than in and out anyway. I'd rather have good times when I'm home in Colorado. So, no, this is my in and out for the year.
You've still, to this day, not had a Jiffy Burger at the Dark Horse, right?
I have not, no.
I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to buy that burger for you, Brian.
Sounds good. We'll do that sometime soon.
All right. Thanks, Brian.